Let's assume that transhumanists achieve their goal of immortality, right? This would be very ironic, because to spend an eternity without purpose and meaning is almost a definition of being in hell, isn't it? It's kind of funny. Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert D. Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. This video is kind of like a part 2 to my previous video, where we've discussed the reasons for the downfall of modern music and architecture. Well, here I'll show that the problem actually lies much deeper, and it's actually, spoiler alert, in the reasons to live in the first place. So we'll consider the third part, like music architecture. Today we'll talk about children, okay? And we'll kind of generalize the whole issue right on. So it may be news to you because of the agenda, actually. No joke. But humanity is currently facing depopulation. So we are currently something like 8.2 billion on the planet in number. However, we will mostly like top off at around 10. Maybe, like, different projections exist, but around 10 I would estimate in like maybe 30 years or about so. And from then it would be a pretty steady, I don't know how quick, but it would be a steady decline from there. And if you look at the map, if I won't forget, I'll actually show it to you right now. It's actually like most of the world is already depopulating, okay? The fertility is already mostly lower than, the replacement level, which is 2.1, roughly speaking, and somewhere it's much, much lower than the replacement level. So most of the westernized societies are actually already dying out, and really only the sub-Saharan Africa is the only region that is still growing. So we'll add maybe like 2 billion of sub-Saharan citizens, whereas the Western world is already dying out. In some places, not the westernized, I don't remember which one I've said, but the westernized world is already dying out, okay? And obviously, like, some conspiracy theorists are saying, well, it's because the global elites have the conspiracy, the depopulation agenda, blah, 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 because apparently, like, the smaller population is easier to control. And this may be true. However, if they think so, like, really, I don't know, but if they do, they're kind of stupid, because it's actually, I wouldn't be surprised if they are actually thinking this and they are actually stupid, because the elites are kind of stupid, just like any other people, myself included, by the way. Because you see, like, if the population is smaller, it means like the labor resources are smaller. And therefore, if you control the banks, which the elites do, right, and you keep printing the worthless money, if you have a smaller population to work for this worthless money, you'll get smaller amount of work done for you, okay? So depopulation is a double-edged sword, so to speak, for the elites. Like, maybe one of them is watching, so maybe if you pursue this agenda, maybe you shouldn't. Just saying. I mean, again, look at the map. We're already depopulating even without your measures. However, one of the tools which has led to depopulation, arguably the most profound tool, was the birth control pill, right? And it was developed in the late 1950s, with help of feminist activists, actually. So in this sense, like, the population agenda has existed within the feminism, okay? I mean, not depopulation maybe specifically, but, gain control over the reproduction and blah, blah, blah. And obviously, the spreading of birth control pill has led to sexual revolution, to the music of the 60s, to hippies, and to things like that, alright? So all of this has actually a clear, very tangible, and easily identifiable biological reason for all the sexual revolution and the culture of the 60s, and actually kind of percolating into later decades as well. Even today, it's still relevant to a large degree. Which, by the way, I've discussed these issues in my video Family and State, watch the link in the description. So I would argue though that it may not even have been any sort of conspiracy, because even the birth control pill only enabled these things, but these things were prepared much earlier, like actually centuries earlier. So it's kind of like there was a ticking time bomb within the Western civilization itself. Kind of, the modernity was it, actually. The modernity was this time bomb which only exploded right now, where we've got, let's say, better control of our reproductive tendencies, and our, again, sexual marketplace kind of reaches a more normal value, and by normal I mean like feral, like in chimpanzees, and etc. Again, watch my video Family and State. I'm talking about this in much more detail. Here I want to focus on something else. Again, I want to focus on this point exactly, how modernity prepared this downfall of population, among other things. Because the numbers show, again, watch the map if you have any doubts, that whatever we're doing, and by we I mean Western civilization, it is not viable in a literal sense, okay? The westernized society is dying out. It's not viable as it is. Again, it's not a moral judgment. It's just a statement of fact. It's a statement of numerical sort, you know, not a qualitative sort. So, for example, like all the kinds of, you know, autistic strategy gamers whom I've encountered previously have been talking about, well, you just, you know, need better material resources, this sort of quasi-Marxist approach, even though they would be against Marx in any other respect. So they're saying, well, just give more food and more affordable housing and people would have more children. And it's just so stupid, I mean, this argument, because there is literally, again, if you look at the numbers, there is no correlation between fertility and affordability of housing. Neither today, if you look at different countries, different regions within the same country, there is absolutely no correlation. Neither in history, all right? So material resources is not correlated at all with fertility, with the amount of children per woman, okay? It's not a strategy game, again, folks. It's not like you buy more, like you build more homes in your strategy game and your population increases. That's not how it works, unfortunately. So, yeah. And by the way, again, watch another video of mine, a very old one, What is Gender and How It Appears, which kind of discusses some of these myths, but on a more fundamental level. Again, what's the difference between male and female and things like that. Okay, so we arrive at the situation, to kind of sum it up, the previous statements of mine and also the ones made in the previous video, that now we have no children, no music, and no architecture, okay? And like, again, to make a quasi-summary to music and architecture specifically, like, again, Johann Sebastian Bach was, you know, dedicating his music to God, yet somehow people right now think that if you remove God from it, Bach would still be possible. And this is just not the case, unfortunately. And neither is the case that good architecture is possible without what I call the story in my previous video, you know? And again, the best example of the story was provided by religion previously. I don't care if it would be religion afterwards, I'm just telling you that without a story, you can't have a meaningful society, really, and meaningful tools of building and sustaining society and maintaining society and, like, how do you call it, like embellishing society, such as music and architecture in particular, right? You can't have cathedrals, you can't have good homes, because when there's no meaning, you know, when the meaning is lost, then why would you build something beautiful, you know? When the meaning is lost, why would you write any beautiful music, you know? You can just write some horrible crap that we're listening to right now. Not me specifically, but other people, okay? I mean, me and you will listen to jazz music, right? We are the elite, okay? I'm referring to my short video. Look into my shorts tab about jazz. Okay, so, and I actually sound like I'm a believer in God, right? But I'm not. Again, watch my video, How to Believe in God in 2024, where I describe this issue in more detail. Again, I'm returning to my very previous video. I'm talking about the story, the lack of story, the lack of some sort of bigger than life stuff that can actually unite many lives together, if you know what I mean. And it doesn't necessarily have to be religion, but my simple and obvious claim would be that we're lacking this right now, okay? And that's why we're lacking children, music, and architecture, and many other things, by the way, as well. But these are very stark, if that's the word, examples of this, okay? Yeah, so God is dead, you know, and you know that it's a metaphor, right? The Nietzsche's words. So we are facing a symptom of there being nothing bigger than yourself, right? There's nothing above a human being, above the atom of society, you know. So therefore there is no society, right? And human being is so small. So if there is nothing big ever, why bother, you know? That's the question you may ask. And that's the question that leads you to not having children, not having music, and not having architecture, essentially. It's this lack of commitment that I talk about in my video, a cool way to save, what was it, religion and marriage or something like that? Where, yeah, like, people don't commit anymore because why would they, you know, if there's nothing bigger than a human life, right? Nothing worth sacrificing for. And children are, you know, they require a lot of sacrifice. So you have to have an excuse to do so. So if there's nothing more important than life anymore, paradoxically, by the way, this fact alone actually makes life itself pointless and not really worth pursuing if you think about it, right? And we could also talk about the, you know, the 70 million abortions worldwide yearly, which happen, okay? Like people complain about Holocaust, you know, 6 million dead. Here we have 70 million yearly, you know, killed by women essentially, and nobody cares, but yeah, well, that's a separate issue. Okay, so Nietzsche actually talked not only about how God is dead, that was his like poetic metaphor for what is happening, but he actually talked in a lot of detail in a more practical way, in very much the same spirit of this video, I would say, or rather this video is very much in the spirit of Nietzsche, which is not surprising. Okay, so he has a book, Will to Power, right, which isn't actually, it kind of doesn't exist, but it kind of does. And in fact, I can tell you it's the most horrific book ever. Like, if you read, not just because it describes how society is falling apart, or rather how it would fall apart, because it was written in like 1885, roughly speaking, 1888, you know, this kind of time frame. But it describes what's happening right now and what has been happening in the previous, like, a century and a half. And it's kind of crazy in this respect. But also, like, if you take it personally, and I did take it personally, it can actually destroy you as a person, you know, kind of break you down completely. So it's a very difficult and problematic and destructive book, I would say. I wouldn't recommend you to read it, actually. So, yeah. And we have all kinds of mental health issues. Again, I'm referring to my other short video on mental health. You know, how the queens of the Stone Age, like, I want something good to die for to make it beautiful to live, you know. Yeah, I'm kind of like, struggling here, how to proceed. See, there's a lot of connected stuff over here. Like, I can give you actually an analogy which would only make things worse, because it's a rather difficult analogy. You see, in biology, for example, the oxidation can happen in two different forms. It can happen as burning, but also rotting and decay, you know. There's two types of glycolysis, for example, within a cell. So, for example, when you have enough oxygen, you have essentially burning of glucose, right? However, if you don't have enough, then, again, this sort of hypoxia is promoted, and you have different types of glycolysis, which produces all kinds of stuff, you know. And this stuff can lead to inflammation and cancer, essentially. So, our modern culture, would be my claim regarding this analogy, is rotten in this exact sense. It kind of breeds cancer instead of the actual burning, you know, the hearth, you know, how Rome had this hearth in the temple of Vesta, of the constant burning. Well, we don't have burning anymore, you know, we only have rotting. So yeah, burning is the noble type of oxidation, and we are rotting and reeking. And I know how horrible it sounds, in the sense that, like, I sound like a pathetic preacher, and I don't like it, but like at some point you just gotta admit that this is what is happening, okay? Like hopefully what I've told you previously at least gives you context to these words of mine, okay? I'm not just saying that we are morally bankrupt or blah blah blah, even though we are, right? I'm trying actually to give you a reason why we are, right? Because we're lacking story, right? We're lacking something bigger than a human being. And therefore, like all of this is happening right now. So humanity as a whole, and by the way, what is interesting, right? So hypoxia leads to inflammation, and right now we have chronic inflammation. Pretty much everyone has it. I mean, you can make an argument it's because of the lack of grounding in electrical sense, but then again, it's a separate discussion. I'll maybe link the video where I explain how it works in the description as well, why grounding helps against inflammation. Anyway, so humanity as a whole, you might say, has lost touch with the world of meaning, what I call the world of meaning. Again, see the link in the description about the perpendicular worlds. And in this respect, you might say it's kind of breeding cancer. Again, right? Humanity is a virus, as Agent Smith said, right? Because cancer cells, just like a human being right now, a single cancer cell does not have a meaning outside of itself, right? So, and then what it means is that if you have a lot of them, your organism dies. So our society is dying because of this, right? It's an old analogy, but it doesn't mean that it's wrong. You know, as above, so below, so to speak. But the difference between the cancer cells and individual human beings right now is that cancer cells proliferate infinitely, right? Whereas individual humans are not proliferating right now. And this is sort of a how would you call it? Injustice. There's a different word with a similar meaning, but I forgot. You may say it's not very just that humans cannot proliferate, even though they look like cancer. Or you may claim that the analogy breaks down here, period, okay? Something like that. However, actually, if you think about it, some humans right now are concerned with immortality. They want to live forever and proliferate forever, just like cancer cells. I mean, things like transhumanism are kind of on a rise, I may say, right? And again, it's kind of ironic and paradoxical because, well, humans have no purpose, right? We don't have any meaning outside of ourselves. So this is ironic because, again, to spend an eternity, like let's assume that transhumanists achieve their goal of immortality, right? This would be very ironic because to spend an eternity without purpose and meaning is almost a definition of being in hell, isn't it? It's kind of funny, I think, right? So if you return again to the religious parables and things like that, like mortality, if you think about it in the first place, mortality is the price we pay for having meaning and purpose in the first place, right? The tree of knowledge, you know? Yeah. So once we acquire meaning, once we acquire understanding, we become mortal, right? But that's kind of like the mythical story, okay? But there is a lot of, you know, meaning to it, no pun intended. Because, well, let's just end on this, okay? Yeah. To conclude, why don't we have children in music and architecture anymore? Well, it's because nothing that makes life worth living exists within life itself. You always need a story to connect multiple lives together, to build and maintain the society. And that hopefully concludes my 2 videos, old man yelling at cloud style of rant. Alright? Thank you for watching. The eons are closing! If you wish to support me, please consider joining my Patreon. That is patreon.com/philosopher. See the link in the description. Or if you have a scientific theory of your own and you'd like my help in developing it, please join my alternative science coaching program, also available through Patreon.